Yad drishtva na parang drishyang, yad bhutva na punarbhavaha, yajñatva na parang jneyang, tad brahmetyavadharayet. Yad drishtva, which when seen, na, not, aparang, anything else, drishyang, to be seen. Yad bhutva, which having become, na, not, punarbhavaha, to be born again in the world. Yajñatva, which when knowing, na, not, aparang, anything else, jneyam, to be known. Tad Brahma, that to be Brahman, iti, thus, avadharayet, realize. That which, when seen, leaves nothing more to be seen, having become which one is not born again into the world of becoming, and which, when known, leaves nothing more to be known. Realize that to be Brahman.
Namaste. So this is a very beautiful verse, and it has deep roots in the Upanishads. So Shankaracharya is not just making this stuff up. I mean, he is, but he knows and he is building upon the ancient writings of the enlightened sages. Because the Upanishads, back in the day, as we went over in our series or our video on the structure of the Vedic literatures, was only for the enlightened ones, only for the renounced ones, who would go to the forest and live a very austere life to gain this knowledge. So there is a story behind this verse, a very ancient, very wonderful story. And I'll read some verses from the Chandogya Upanishad and explain them. Harihi Om. There lived one Shvetaketu, Aruneya. His father said to him, O Shvetaketu, live the life of the religious student. Verily, my boy, no one in our family has ever been unlearned, and hence Brahmana only in name. So Shvetaketu was the son of Udalaka and the grandson of Aruni. Remember Aruni? We ran into him a few verses back. The morning sun. So he's the grandson of the sun god, not just anybody. So when he was 12 years old, his father said, okay, you need to become a real Brahmana, learned in all the Vedas. Not just a Brahmana in name, not one who just wears the thread, and then points to some ancient ancestor and says, well, he was a real Brahmana. No, but one who becomes a Brahmana, an authentic Brahmana himself. Of course, a Brahmana means one who lives in Brahman, or as Brahman, one who's realized, in other words. And the path to becoming a Brahmana is called brahmachari, which means to live in Brahman. Therefore, they're young, celibate students, and they have to do hours and hours of chanting and memory training every day for years to learn the Vedas. So, okay, he came back 12 years later. He's 24 years old. And what then? Having gone when 12 years old, he came back when he was 24 years old, having studied all the Vedas, highly conceited, regarding himself a great scholar and arrogant. His father said to him, O Shvetaketu, since thou art so highly conceited, regarding thyself as a great scholar and arrogant, Did thou ask for that teaching? And we're going to find out in the next verse what the teaching is. But try to understand, he just spent 12 years in intense 24/7 immersion in the Sanskrit Vedas. Now, what are the Vedas? Well, if you watched that video that I linked to, the Vedas are instructions for sacrifices, rituals, fire ceremonies, all kinds of ceremonies. And then in the succeeding sections of the Vedas called the Aranyakas explain the meaning of the rituals. And then finally, the Upanishads give the essence. So he may have studied the Vedas and the Aranyakas because he was living in the forest. Aranyaka means that which is taught in the forest. He was living in the forest as a brahmachari for 12 years. But then he came back all puffed up. What went wrong? Well, he was concentrating only on the literature and the sacrifices. He didn't study the deep meaning in the Upanishads, which you can't even approach if you're puffed up. So his father decided to take him down a peg. And he said, well, when you were there studying all that stuff, did you ask this question? What was that question?
What is that through which the unheard becomes heard, the unthought of becomes thought of, and the unknown becomes known? What is that teaching, sir?
My boy, just as through a clod of clay, all that is made of clay would become known, all products being due to words, a mere name, the clay alone is real. So this is a metaphor. This is an example. You can take clay and you can make it into pots, pitchers, jars, plates, all manner of statues, decorations, picture frames, whatever. They're still only clay. So if you know clay, if you understand clay, what it is, it's this earthen material that can be shaped and will retain its form, especially after firing. What happens is that when the clay is fired, the minerals, especially the silicates, glassy minerals in the clay, melt and they bind it together so that after firing, the clay remains hard and retains its form. But they're still only clay. So he's making a metaphor, and of course the application is Brahman is the cause, source, origin, and material that builds everything. Everything in the world is built from Brahman. The only difference is name and form. In other words, mental superimpositions. So you try to understand by analogy that just like clay is the ultimate form and source of everything made from clay, the only difference is the shape, the name and form. The words, in other words, what's in our minds. Similarly, the universe is only made of Brahman, and the only difference between this thing and that thing is name and form. So let's see what happens next. My boy, just as through a single ingot of gold, all that is made of gold would become known, all product being due to words, a mere name. The gold alone is real. My boy, just as through a single nail clipper, all that is made of iron would become known. All product being due to words, a mere name, the iron alone being real. Such, my boy, is that teaching. So then, of course, the boy was nonplussed. because he thought he had learned everything there was to know. And now his father is coming up with this teaching that he has never heard. It's beyond him. He can't grasp it. And later on in this big chapter, chapter 6 of Chandogya Upanishad, this is the famous chapter where he is told again and again, actually 12 times, Tat Tvamasi, thou art that Brahman. And he couldn't get it. He had to keep asking, see, because his cup was full. He thought he already knew. There was no room in his head for any radical new teaching. But this teaching is something beyond. The ritualists don't know it. And they can't grasp it because it's not based on action. It's only based on being. It's ontological in nature. So then what happens? Surely those revered ones did not know this. If they had known it, why should not they have taught it to me? You, respected sir, teach it to me. So be it, my dear, he said. So then he goes on to teach his son, Udalaki, very nice name, goes on to teach his son about Brahman. And the son is really in difficulty. He can't get it. There is no subject-object duality, no actor, verb, and object. All the sentences are without an object because Brahman is never an object. Brahman is always the subject. Brahman is always the seer, never the seen. Brahman is always the witness, never the doer, never the knower or the possessor of anything. So all the sentences describing Brahman are non-dual. And the boy is completely confused. It takes him really the rest of the chapter to finally get it. He has to be told again and again and again that you are that. You are that Brahman. You are nothing but. And the whole rest of the world is also the same. Just the only differences you see are due to name and form, only words. But Brahman is the same thing in everything. Brahman is consciousness. Brahman is the seer. So everything that you see through Brahman. Therefore, Brahman cannot be known directly. It can only be known by inference that, oh, there is consciousness. So there must be a source of consciousness. There must be a seer, there must be a witness, but that witness cannot see itself because it is the seer. That famous verse in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. How can the knower be known? That through which everything is known. No one can know the knower.
Om Tat Sat, Om Shakti